He thinks we're both suckers because we got married
Yep.
to women.
Yep. Whereas me, I'm gonna be married to. All right, let's start the podcast. I'm married to the podcast. Hello and welcome back to Last Place Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your co-host Ethan, joined once again by Ryan. Today we're talking about fantasy performances from wide receivers last season. And before we get started, drop down any comments below of guys who surprised you, guys who were anomalies, guys who disappointed. But Ryan, I know we have some that we want to talk about, and you have your spread that you like starting off
Yeah.
with, so I'll kick it on to you.
Okay. So yeah, we're going over wide receivers for the 2023 season. Just the statistics. We're going over the numbers of pretty much what they did all year, and we're just going to be evaluating them and taking a look at what
And
they did last
some
year.
you need to take with a grain of salt,
Yeah. Yeah.
either good or bad.
Um,
Good or
yeah,
bad.
exactly. Good or bad, take it with a grain of salt. Um, but we're looking at the fantasy point spread. So the fantasy point spread from number one wide receiver to number five was 114 points, which is kind of crazy. Like pretty crazy. Like it was pretty much CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra, Puka, and AJ Brown.
And then everybody.
And yeah, and then everybody else. Well, really, in
I mean,
all
really, it was just
honesty, it
CD.
was it was CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and I'd
And
say Amon-Ra, and then everybody else.
yeah,
But from 1 to 5, that's a decent range. Um, from 5 to 10, the spread was only 24 points.
oh yeah,
So
they're super
it's
tight.
not bad. So like you get a good range between 1 and 10. Like you get a solid amount of points. Between 10 and 20, that's where you get a lot of your value receivers, and that's where you get like the
And the
guys that
spread's not
performed
very big.
well but weren't like superstars.
Yeah, the
And
super big on.
38 points.
Yeah,
Like 38 points between 10
and
and 20 is pretty good.
and so you're talking 38 points, but that's not like, oh, there's 30 between all of them. It's like I'd say from like 10 to 17 is really solid. And then at like 18, 19, 20, you see a little bit
Yeah.
of that dip.
Yeah.
Like they're
No,
all
but
within each other
I
to
think
like,
that's because that's where you get like between 10 and 20 is where you get your solid wide receiver twos. And like that's where you get a lot of your performance players. Like they have good weeks, they're fairly consistent, 15 points most of the time. That's a lot of the times where you get those players that bring you a good base of your weekly points.
yeah.
So yeah, no, I like the spread between 10 and 20. Like you want that to be small. Because if you get a large spread between 10 and 20, there's something wrong. That means there's a lot of points higher up, and the lower you go, the less points, a lot less points that you get when you get closer to 20. So that 38 point spread between 10 and 20 is good. Um, Now let's look at some of the statistical anomalies. Touchdown rate
Hmm.
was kind of crazy with some of these guys. Um, Mike Evans, 16% touchdown rate. That's
Yeah,
almost every 5 times he touches the ball,
he
he gets a
scores.
touchdown. Yeah, which
Yeah.
that's nuts. And then on the other end, and Mike Evans was a top seven wide receiver this year. And that was with a 16 point, you know, touchdown rate. Now, obviously, those that have been in the league for a while know Mike Evans is very, very touchdown dependent. He got what, 13 touchdowns this year, which in all
Um,
honesty, like that's the most. He's tied with Tyreek Hill. right now for the most touchdowns in the
Yep,
league.
13.
So,
The entire.
that's pretty good. But, on the other end of the scale, Puka Nakua, who's ranked, what, 3 spots above Mike Evans,
Mhm.
only has a 5% touchdown rate. Now, I mean, obviously, we know
He was a
why,
reception
because
monster.
he's a reception hoarder. He got all of the receptions on that team the first, like,
And he was
what,
their
five
whole
weeks,
offense at the
four
start of the year.
weeks. Yeah, at the start of the year, he was their whole offense. So like he got the receptions. So he wasn't much of a touchdown threat, but he definitely like got the receptions
I
that
mean,
he needed. And
he
that,
was a touchdown
yeah.
threat, but that
No, but not
wasn't
as much
really their.
as Mike Evans,
Well,
I'm
yeah, I
saying.
mean, it just wasn't really their philosophy of
Yeah,
having him like throwing it. They were trying to run it in the
yeah,
Rams, not to get too much into scheme, but like you don't look at him and think, oh, like I need the Rams offense to score me a touchdown in the red zone,
yeah,
a passing touchdown too. It's not as likely to happen. Whereas the Bucks are like, yeah, we can run it in, but we also have Mike
yeah.
Evans.
Hmm.
So what do you want us to do? And when
Yeah,
he scores
and
16% of the time, I think they're onto something.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You're telling me we
And
have a
I
one in
mean,
five chance to score a touchdown if we throw it to Mike Evans? Okay. That's our game plan. Try and
yeah.
stop.
And I mean it's the uh same thing with Puka was the issue with AJ Brown. Now, AJ Brown was ranked number 5, but he only had a 6.6%
Well, if you want
touchdown
to
rate.
go worse than that, look at Pittman, man. His was like
Yeah,
3.5%. And
yeah.
he's wide receiver 13. Like you talk about he
Well, because he
starts
was a reception
converting.
monster.
Yeah. Well, same thing as to a lesser degree as Puka, but you talk about him converting some of those touchdowns, bringing up that percentage a little bit, and you're
Yeah,
talking about a top five wide receiver.
yeah, yeah. And if Pittman was in the red zone or in the end zone more, he would for sure have been, I'd
Top
say,
five.
a top with his receptions and his yardage numbers.
Top
He
five.
could have
Not even
easily
close.
been in the top 10. I'd say top 7, up there with Mike Evans. Because Mike Evans, I mean, he had top 15 numbers, but because of the touchdowns, he was a top 7. Like really, he only had 79 receptions, and everybody else in the top 10, except for DJ Moore, was 100 receptions or more, 100 to 110, with the exception of
Yeah.
CeeDee Lamb,
Yeah, you're not wrong. You give
130
Mike Evans a
or
few more
35.
receptions, and that's
But
that.
you give him a few more receptions, yeah, and
Well, yeah.
he's
I
up
mean,
there.
you say it like this. So if you put him up with everybody else, which is giving him 20 more receptions, that's 20 more points. That's enough to get to number four.
Yeah, well, and say, he averages what points per reception. I don't think we have that stat up here, but obviously you give him like 10 yards on that. That
Yeah.
ups
That
his points by a
that,
ton, and it
that
puts
gets
him
him
in top
close.
5 contention.
Well, yeah,
So,
it already, you give him 20 more receptions, he's top five. I mean,
yeah,
you give him yards on top of that and potentially touchdowns, you're talking about a top three wide receiver,
yeah.
which is
So,
interesting to look at, especially with all the money that they just gave him.
yeah, for
In
real.
terms of like his stats, I don't think Mike Evans statistically is going anywhere. I thought he might be, but
Yeah.
it really doesn't seem like it. Like they built
No.
something with Baker and they've invested into him, and it seems like
Yeah. And I
they're here
think they want
for
to
at
keep
least a few more.
Evans. Yeah, they want to keep Evans there because obviously he was working with Baker. Like he was cooking. So, um, let's go on to big play rate. So like these are 20 plus point or 20 plus yard plays. Now I want to these are all statistical anomalies. So like stats that kind of popped out to us that stood out from the rest. So just going over big play rate, Nico Collins.
Mm-hmm.
Nico Collins, who was number 12 this year in wide receiver, 37.27% big play rate.
And
That's
that tracks
crazy.
because I watched a lot of Houston games last season, and whenever you saw Nico pop up, it was like Nico and what's his name? Not Tank, the other wide receiver, Noah Brown. Whenever you saw
Yeah,
Nico or Noah Brown, they were just getting these monster receptions downfield, like
yeah.
huge plays. Like, and that was kind of all of Houston just being super explosive. They weren't a dink and dunk team. They were a
Hmm.
light you up kind of team, and they
Yeah,
either lit you up or they didn't. But I mean, in terms of just looking at that statistic, it doesn't surprise me because that seemed like their whole offense was
yeah,
generating explosive plays.
yeah. And it doesn't surprise me. It just pops. It stands out,
Oh
because
yeah,
it's
from the
that
rest,
that's a
yeah.
very unique stat. Like,
But
I mean,
Houston
almost
themselves stand
40%.
out from the rest of the NFL, I feel like.
Yeah.
So,
And the next one up from that, which is even more crazy, is Brandon Ayuk at 40%.
yeah, I didn't
I
watch
mean,
a lot
that's
of.
almost every other
I
every other
refuse.
catch for him
I can't stand San
was,
Francisco, so I didn't watch.
yeah, but that's interesting, like a 40% big play rate.
Yeah, no, it's
That's
crazy.
nuts. That means he was moving the ball, whether it was
So
a short pass. Now, obviously, with the Mike Shanahan offense, it's good at like getting people open downfield.
right,
Like I, I can believe it from IU.
and now Ryan,
So
that's people who did the big
yeah,
play well. I want to highlight some people who did it poorly, not the low play rate, but who
yeah,
had big play rates, but were. You'll understand when I give you names. So the first one is Amari Cooper at 32%. You would
yeah,
think of a big play rate of 32%, he'd be higher, but that's wide receiver 20. And
yeah.
another one I wanted to bring up um,
What's crazy is
was
he had a
George
better big
Pickens.
play rate than Tyreek.
Yeah. So George Pickens, 38.5%, almost 39%, so close to Ayuk, but he's wide receiver 29.
Yep,
So it's a play style, and it's a good play style. It's a fun one. Rashid Shaheed, another one, 37.8%.
yeah,
And like those big plays are awesome and you want to get them, but when you have limited opportunities or when you're in a bad offense like George Pickens and Rashid Shaheed,
yeah,
it's kind of tough to convert that like others who are in good offenses like San Francisco and Houston to climb up that ladder fantasy wise. So that's why I always tell people be careful with big plays because it's awesome when you get them, but when you're in that fantasy matchup and you've got a guy who's a big play guy and you need him to hit, they always seem to let you down.
yeah,
Whereas these consistent steady Eddie guys, I don't know. That's where my heart is. That's what won
yeah,
me my first couple of fantasy championships is guys who I knew was going to perform. And when I was down
yeah,
15 points, I was like, bro, I'm about to smoke you because I know he's going to get me 18 or 20 or whatever it
yeah,
is.
yeah. And yeah, I agree with that. I love those types of guys that are
Yeah.
consistent,
I'm not
that
sitting
get
here
those
praying,
sorts of points.
oh, Mike Evans,
Yeah,
please catch 2 touchdowns
yeah.
and 50 points. Like,
And like that, it goes to show in the top 10, there's two players that had low big play rates, but they were fairly consistent with their receptions. And that was Stephon Diggs and Devontae Adams. They both ranged between 10 and 11%
yep.
on their big play rate. And, that's fairly low compared to the rest of the top 10. They had 20 plus, or, well, with the exception of Keenan Allen,
Yeah.
only had about
The
16.
Keenan Allen's also
But,
a different statistical
but
anomaly. So,
yeah, but like everybody else had 20 plus, while these two, their big play rates, so their big plays weren't necessarily there, but they were getting consistent receptions and consistent targets, and it showed because they are obviously top 10 wide receivers. So I was just surprised with Stephon Diggs because with Josh Allen, it feels like he's throwing the ball downfield every
Yeah.
chance he gets. And I was
But that
really
wasn't
surprised
Diggs'
to only see
play.
that
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 was
Stephon Diggs only got 11% on a big play
that
rate.
was Gabe Davis's role, and that's
Yeah.
why their offense didn't work is because they were trusting him to do that for him and he didn't. So
Yeah.
now the bad.
So
Now the bad big play
yeah.
rate.
Now, yeah, the bad big play rate. Adam Thielen. I don't blame him because
Yeah,
I mean
that
it
guy
really
was
it
that
wasn't
guy was in
his
purgatory.
fault. Yeah, that it wasn't his fault. I mean, he was in an offense where they couldn't get the ball downfield at all. They
Yeah.
couldn't move the ball. So, him getting his receptions, he always got them like 10 yards, 5 yards down the field. And because I mean, Bryce Young, he was running for his life every single play. So I
Which
don't
now they
blame him.
started signing some O linemen, so maybe not next.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad they're finally bolstering that O line. So hopefully, hopefully it'll be better next year for him.
Hopefully,
But
please God, let it be
yeah,
better.
yeah, because I really truly believe he is a good player. He just was not in a great situation there. So
I don't know.
I hope
Time
they
will
start
tell.
building around him.
Time.
Um, yeah, time will tell. So that's enough of the big play rate. We're gonna go on to which wide receivers were you underwhelmed with this year when it comes to their performance? And I'll let you answer the first one, Ethan.
Yeah, one of them was mine, and I'm glad we agree on him. But Chris Godwin, I don't know what the disconnect was at the beginning of the season that dropped him so much. But I
Hmm.
mean, Chris Godwin is a really good player, and wide receiver 28, like that is not who he is. I mean, 83 receptions, 1,000-yard receiver, 1,024 yards. And then you
Yeah,
go into let's see what was it, four or two touchdowns? Yeah, two touchdowns. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with this guy. He had decent big plays, like somewhat in the ballpark of percentage of other good players,
yeah,
but it just seemed like the beginning of the season he was not getting looked at all. I mean, at the end of the season, Chris Godwin started to actually be fairly consistent and be a pretty good wide receiver for me. Um, I'm gonna pull up his stuff for the last couple of games, but it just seemed
yeah.
like
Well, and
there's a disconnect at
yeah,
the start of the year.
yeah, and really, like when it comes to their touchdown rate, sorry, this just popped to me. With the exception of Garrett Wilson and Drake London, Chris Godwin had the worst touchdown rate.
Yeah, and
You know,
that'll do it when
the
you're only
only
scoring
one,
two.
the only ones worse than him were Drake London and Garrett Wilson at 3%, which is crazy. Like
Yeah,
he only scored two touchdowns all year.
I don't know. I don't know what happened with them. But Baker's got to figure that out. Like that offense can't
Yeah,
be Rashad White and Mike Evans because that's not enough.
yeah.
And you
He
kind of
has to
saw
spread the ball around a little more,
yeah, you saw
especially
it
in the red
in
zone.
the Detroit game. Like they were just outclassed because they didn't have that extra oomph offensively. And
Yeah.
that can be Chris Godwin for them. Like that is an incredibly talented wide receiver. And if you're not going to use him with Baker Mayfield, then cut that guy loose. Like
Yeah.
he's too good to be in Mike Evans' shadow and never used because that's all Baker wants to do. Like he's so much better than that. And you saw that with Tom Brady. When he was with Tom Brady, like he was one of the better wide receivers in the league because he had a QB who knew how to find him. Because that guy is always open. Like if you were to pull up Chris Godwin film and you were to watch it, you would see pretty consistently, I think, that that guy is just always open. So they got to find a way to use him and get him some more. I mean, the targets aren't terrible, 130, but I know a lot of them were just bad throws from Baker because I watched Tampa
Yeah.
Bay a lot. I wanted to see if Chris Godwin was going to figure it out or not. A lot of it was on Baker,
Hmm.
of where he missed. But 12 yards per reception, 1,000-yard receiver, but the two touchdowns, like he deserves better than that. And that's
Yeah.
all I'll say on
Yeah.
him.
I agree. And I'm kind of the same mind with Garrett Wilson. Like I believe that he deserves better.
Now
I
he,
think
he
he's a
was
very
a
skilled
Rod
wide
list.
receiver.
He was a Rod list, so
Yeah, I
we
know.
take
I
we take
know. And
Garrett
that's
with a grain
why,
of salt. Back to what we said at the very beginning. We take
yeah,
Garrett Wilson with a grain of salt.
yeah. Garrett Wilson, I think with the right QB, I think he's going to be a fantastic wide receiver. But I don't he obviously did not have a good QB this year. And with Aaron Rodgers going limp on the second play of the game or third play of the game. Um, so I I was just very underwhelmed overall with his performance this year at
Yeah.
wide receiver 26. It was a good year for him, generally speaking.
Hmm.
Reception wise, targets, all of that was great. I mean, his targets ranked up there, like he had 168 targets. He's obviously very favored in this offense.
Yeah.
That ranks up there with like the top five. Like he could be up there with the top five if he had a good quarterback. But
Yeah. Well,
and I mean he
similar
had a
to
1,000 yard season too,
he's similar
which
to
is
Chris
great.
Godwin. Like, just
So
he did not have someone that could get him the ball, and that
exactly, and
that,
especially in the
that
end zone.
ripple was a wide receiver.
Yeah, and that's that, especially like in the end zone. Like he only got 3 touchdowns all year. Yeah, 3 touchdowns all year. He had a 3% touchdown rate and only a 12% big play rate, which wasn't horrible, but obviously wasn't up there. So I foresee him having a fantastic year next year. I think he's very skilled. He just needs somebody to throw him the ball accurately. So,
Uh,
but I was just underwhelmed this year. George Pickens was another one that I was underwhelmed with. I think he got overshadowed by Deontay Johnson. Um,
which is a joke in itself.
yeah. Um, so I was a little underwhelmed with him, and his stats are iffy. He had a good big play rate, and he had some plays that were like eye popping, that were great, but I think he just got overshadowed. I think this year with Deontay Johnson being out of the Steelers, I think he makes his emergence as wide receiver one, the solidified wide receiver one for the Steelers. Um, but I was just a little underwhelmed with his stats this year,
Yeah.
being at wide receiver 29. Um, is there another one that you want to point out?
Yeah, my last one is Drake London.
Okay.
Um, another homer, because you've kind of covered the ones that are like in general bad, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna get on my soapbox about a guy from my team that I was very underwhelmed with, but everyone should be underwhelmed. Like, you're telling me you have a wide receiver one that you can only get 69 receptions to and two touchdowns. And then people wonder like why the Atlanta offense struggled the past couple of years. Like, he just needed someone who can get him the ball, like a lot of these other guys that we're talking about that we're underwhelmed with. And that's why the Kirko change is going to be scary. Like,
Yeah.
you're probably pretty happy if you're a Drake owner right now, a Drake and maybe Pitts. I don't know yet. We're going to see what they do in the draft too, because they could draft a wide receiver that guy
Hmm.
might be in for a season. But yeah, it's just 69 receptions is unacceptable. Two touchdowns for a wide receiver one is unacceptable. Um, but we'll see what happens this season. And
Yeah.
I'll kind of leave it at that.
And that is a kind of a wait and see for this upcoming year. So
I'd be holding him. I
I
wouldn't cut
agree with
him.
that.
If you cut him
Yeah.
at the like right as the season ended, you probably feel pretty pretty bad for
Pretty
yourself
dumb. Yeah,
as they signed
I
Kirko.
get that. Yeah, with the Kirko signing, I see a lot of hope for the receiving core for the Falcons, and a lot of hope for Kyle Pitts too, potentially.
Maybe
You know, for Pitts owners that he had a fantastic year
rookie.
one,
And then the
and
last two
then
years.
the last 2 years he's literally just gone out and taken a crap on the field. So, it's nice to see a little hope in the eyes of Pitts owners.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, so let's go on to surprising performances from wide receivers.
I think
So,
you have the biggest.
receivers that surprised, not necessarily on the stats, because we got one on here that didn't perform great in a year picture, but
In terms of what
when he
he
was
did.
out on the field and healthy, he performed fantastic. And statistically, he was off the charts. So let's go over our first one. You wanted to talk about a certain someone.
Yeah, and I'm gonna talk about him again at the end, but it's DJ.
Okay. Yeah, just do a general brush over him.
Yeah. So DJ Moore. I mean, obviously we're surprised that he's a top 10 wide receiver. Wide
Very.
receiver 6 is definitely surprising. Off of 96 receptions is also surprising. It's a little bit under what the rest of the top 5 was, but and some of the other guys who were in the top 15, he's a little bit under them. But the 1,300 yards, 8 touchdowns, which isn't great. Um, but yeah, I was definitely surprised by him and how they were using him in Chicago. So it's gonna be interesting to see him going forward. But that finish and it's like all of his numbers together, the end result makes sense, but it just looks wrong for DJ
Yeah,
Moore.
yeah.
If
It
that
it
makes sense.
doesn't look like the DJ Moore that we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
Like he was a solid top 15 wide receiver. He looked good, but he
He
didn't
was a
look
nice
great.
flex every now and again, and
Yeah,
got
he
you some
looked good,
touchdowns.
but he didn't look like fantastic, like, starting roster. Great. But, you know, I liked what I saw from DJ Moore this year. I Now with what's going to be a new quarterback, I don't know, but I'm hopeful. Um, yeah, that's just it. I'm hopeful, and I'm going to leave it at that. So let's go on to our second wide receiver, one that I didn't think he would be this high, um, but I figured he would have some sort of impact. Nico Collins, our wide receiver 12.
I mean, I don't think
With a new rookie quarterback, I did not think he would make, top 15, maybe top 20. I did not think top 15. So seeing Nico make the top 12, and that's with Tank Dell taking a lot of those receptions early on. It was really interesting to watch his progression throughout the year.
oh,
So I really loved seeing Nico Collins. I think next year, if Nico and Tank Dell are on the field together,
oh
they're
boy.
going to be fantastic,
And
especially
from the
with their
jump,
new QB.
not in bits and
Yeah,
pieces,
yeah.
from the jump to the end.
I
That's
think we found our new, high-powered offense
oh yeah.
for yeah, for the Texans. Like, fantastic. All right.
A little upgrade on deep.
Um,
They'll be ready to
yeah,
roll.
is there another wide receiver you wanted to talk about
I
for
mean,
surprising performances?
just really quickly, like he is on here and like we've talked about him as a rookie, but Puka being fantasy
Yeah,
receiver 4 is insane. And we've already
that's a
talked about his
given.
numbers before, so yeah,
Yeah,
we won't go over them again. But that
yeah.
just to bring it up is insane.
Just to bring it up, because I mean, we have to bring it up. Nobody thought Puka was going to do this year.
No,
Like that was such
if
a
if you,
surprising performance. He
if
was
you
a
drafted
reception
him,
hog on that offense.
if you
So
drafted him, everyone would have been shocked. Like, what are you doing,
yeah,
bro? Who's
yeah,
Puka Nakua?
yeah.
And if
So
If you can, like we forced your dad into drafting him as a joke.
Yeah.
We're like,
Well, he just thought,
take him because of his name.
yeah, he just thought the name was cool.
Yeah.
And then
We
he
were
ended
giving him
up getting
crap.
like a
We gave
star
him
wide receiver.
we gave him
So,
crap for 3 rounds as we were drafting.
I
To,
mean,
and
dude,
he finally
I
did.
I will never not talk about that on this podcast. My dad got Puka Nakua, Kyron Williams, and the Lions
Sam
tight end,
Laporta
and Laporta, Sam Laporta.
and
He got
Bijan.
all three of them, and
And
Bijan,
Bijan.
all in the same draft. I mean, that's like he half of his team. It's fantastic, man. Best draft I've ever seen.
And then he missed the
But
playoffs because he sucks.
and then he
Anyway.
missed the playoffs. Yeah, exactly. I kicked him out of the playoffs.
Um,
So yeah, that's just funny.
which he would have
But
handed you your rear end if he had made it into
yeah,
the playoffs.
I know. I
You would have
know.
beaten Josh and you would have played him in the super or the fantasy.
Yeah. Oh man.
Uh,
So
so
yeah,
good
so
win.
Puka Nakua obviously another one that we wanted to talk about that again going back to the beginning of this little segment over the year did not look good because he ended up as wide receiver 39.
Hmm.
But individual performances for short periods of the season, fantastic
Yeah.
and looked great.
Yeah.
And that was Tank Dell. Tank Dell just blew up. Like week two, he looked fantastic. Week three looked
Oh
fantastic.
yeah. Had
Kind
he not
of it
gotten injured,
was a little bit of a lull weeks 4 through 8, but then came
but
back
that's
and
he wasn't really getting
had
that playing
fantastic.
time
Yeah,
in that middle of the
and
season. They
exactly.
weren't using him. His snap
Yeah,
percentage was down, and
yeah,
then they got him. They're like, wait, that guy's really good. And then it was
yeah,
just over from there. Exploded until he
yeah,
got
yeah. Until that one end zone play.
because you want to run inside
So
run with your 100-pound wide receiver blocking because that makes
I
sense
knew that
in the NFL.
I knew that would trigger Ethan because
Dude,
he's had multiple
I have
rants about
nightmares.
it on here.
I have nightmares about using.
Oh my gosh.
If I ever see Tank Dell in the red zone
Uh,
blocking for inside run, we're gonna have a problem. I'm gonna have a problem with someone.
oh my gosh. Okay, all
I'll
right.
be throwing
So
hands.
moving on from, I think that's our all of our surprising performances from wide receivers. I
So
think that's all that I wanted to bring up.
I mean,
So
I do want to talk about really
do you
quickly.
have another one?
No, no,
Okay.
no. I just the next category of the people who should be near the top.
Oh
Uh,
well, yeah. Here, let's do the announcement. Just formally. All
yeah,
right. Our next
that
segment,
was that was
wide
a fun.
receivers that should be near the top, but because they missed games,
Mm-hmm.
they were low on the charts for the year overall.
Who would have
Now,
seen it?
one of them is already who we talked about, so we
Yeah,
don't need to talk about him.
who missed
But
six
Tank
games?
Dell,
We'll throw that
yeah,
in.
Tank Dell missed 6 games,
Was on
probably would have been a
pace.
top 10.
He was on pace if he had kept the same
Yeah,
pace he was on to be a top 10 wide receiver.
he would have been a top 10 wide receiver if he kept that same pace.
Maybe
So
great.
that's
We'll
one.
never know.
That's one we've already talked about. And then the other three we kind of haven't really touched on.
Yeah, I
The
mean we
number
brought up
one in
one
my
name.
book, number one in my book was Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
I think with how if Cousins wouldn't have been injured and he wouldn't have and JJ wouldn't have been injured, JJ would have been a top 5 wide receiver.
Yeah.
Completely would have been a top 5 wide receiver. But
But
he
also,
ended up the year at
I
wide
don't know
receiver
that
33,
their passing offense without Kirk wasn't that great.
abysmal, was abysmal. That's why like I said, if Cousins hadn't been injured and JJ,
Yeah, well, I'm talking about like with what they had for the rest of the year. Like
yeah,
even if he was a part of those 7 games,
yeah,
I I don't know. I guess we'll never know is the other thing about it
yeah,
because we can't live in that reality. But
yeah. Of
It would
course.
have been interesting to see where he finished if he plays in those 7 games.
No, but you know what? What was really surprising for me is in 10 games, he still had 1,000 yard season,
Yeah.
which is awesome. That's nuts. So 1,000 yard season, and he missed 7 games.
Yeah.
So that's all I had to say on Jake. So if you have another one,
Are you getting rid of him with no QB in Minnesota? Are you trying to trade JJ?
no,
Fair enough.
no, not a chance.
Um, I mean, I think the only other big one is Cooper Cup. Um, that one is still kind of interesting because even with Cup and Puka there, it seemed like Puka was still kind of the guy.
Yeah,
Um, but I mean, Cooper Cup would have been statistically better and fantasy finish way better than where he was if he
yeah,
plays in those 5 games. And I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to say that
yeah,
Cooper Cup in those 5 games would have exploded for at least 2 of them.
yeah. And I put down in my notes he missed 5 games, but I would put him in the top 15 if he were to stay for those 5 games and play.
Yeah, I mean it's
I would
possible.
say he would make the
And
top play.
I mean it's a possibility if he plays in those games and Puka isn't blown up at the start of the year, that
Yeah,
he would have had a much better season
yeah,
than and Puka would have had, you know,
yeah. But
probably
since
still a
he
good
had,
season, but not
mhm,
what he did this last year.
yeah, but since Puka got that time with Stafford and developed that trust with Cup out, I I think Puka got
Yeah.
vaulted above him.
Chemistry is
So
great.
yeah,
For-
chemistry is very big in the NFL, and I think like Stafford and Puka developed that chemistry the first couple of games. Um, I do have one more. Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen was wide receiver 8, and he missed 4 games.
Yeah, that guy was on a different level
That's
last.
crazy. Like he missed 4 games, and he's a wide receiver 8.
Well, now he's in
Like
Chicago.
imagine if he would have been in the last 4 games, he very easily could have been a top 4, top 3
Yeah,
wide receiver.
could have
Like
passed
there's only a 20-point difference between him and wide receiver 4. So
He could have done
he
it.
could have he could have vaulted him on Raw and been wide receiver 3 if he would have had those 4 games. So that's just to
If
me,
ifs
I
and
felt
buts,
like he would have been up
if
there.
it's and buts were candies and nuts, Ryan,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If ifs and buts, he's in this.
we all have a Merry Christmas.
There you go.
Ryan, how did
So
stack up to veteran players in the league?
yeah, this one I like this segment because this we kind of get a look at how our rookies performed last year. And to be honest, with a majority of them, I see a lot of hope. Man, I see a lot of hope. I see a lot of potential because of the way they were used. Um, Puka, obviously, we've already talked about him. Wide receiver 4, I don't think he's moving out of the top 10 this upcoming year. He was fantastic. Tank Dell, we already talked about him. So
Yeah, let's see
you
what he's
already know
like
all of
with a
that.
with a full season and
Yeah,
hopefully no more insight.
exactly. Yeah. So Jaden Reed is one we haven't talked about yet.
He's
But he was wide receiver 25,
yeah,
which in Green Bay,
and
which
and his
already
rise,
he was wide receiver 3 to
yeah,
start the year.
at the start, but his rise was really interesting to see because I mean at the very start he was wide receiver 2 when you had the injury stuff going on
Yeah.
with can't forget his name, but he's also fantasy irrelevant too, and it was Romeo
Christian
Dobbs.
Watson. Oh,
Christian
and
Watson.
Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs were the
Romeo
top
Dobbs
two.
was wide receiver 1, and then Christian Watson was injured, so you had Jaden Reed, and
Yeah.
then you had Wicks as wide receiver
Yeah.
3
Yeah.
of the year. And you didn't really
Yeah.
see him like you saw him pop big plays at the start of the year, but he didn't have many opportunities. It felt
Mhm.
like, and then you saw him at the end of the year, and he was just blowing up. Like he was a
Yeah.
stud for them to end the year.
Yeah. And, 7 out of the 9 last games that they played, that he played, he had 15 points or above, which that's a great floor,
That's solid.
great base to work with. And I love to see that consistency
Yeah, that's a
in my
flex
wide
player. That's a
receivers.
that's a solid flex player right
That's
there.
a solid flex player, possible low end wide receiver too. Possible like mid range wide receiver too, if you're not that deep with wide receiver.
Yeah.
But like
He's a guy to
Jaden
hold
Reed,
on to.
I think he's a plug and play next year at a flex position.
Yeah, I
Like
agree.
I think he's a solid plug and play, especially with the chemistry that he had with Jordan Love near the end of the year when Love started going off. I really do think he's a plug and play. So the next one that we've got, Rushy Rice.
Now he's similar to Jaden Reed, like kind of
Yeah,
irrelevant at the start of
I
the year.
would I would put him in that same area.
Yeah, but at the back end of the year was so solid. And in the playoffs, he was their guy. Like it
Yeah,
was a little bit Kelsey, but I would argue it was more Rashi Rice throughout the playoffs and on that Super
yeah,
Bowl run than it was Kelsey making. And obviously Pacheco had his big runs too, and Pacheco was
hmm
solid, but I think Rashi Rice with a full year of Mahomes being like, this is my wide receiver one could elevate him a little bit beyond
yeah,
this 27, right? You finished, yeah, wide receiver
yeah,
20.
yeah. Wide receiver 27. I really do. Yeah, I think he could end up being a solid wide receiver two next year. And possibly if he makes the leap and if Mahomes favors him next year, if they don't really add anybody to their wide receiving core, which I don't see
Which
that happening
they
because that
already
was a
did.
big struggle last year.
They already
I know,
did.
but any major additions.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So like any major additions to
Like you're
that
talking
wide
about like
receiving
if they
roster,
had traded for Keenan Allen type thing.
yes, or if they make a top pick for a wide receiver
Yeah.
in the
Which
draft.
none of them will be there where they're picking, but
So yeah,
they'd have
but
to
still.
trade up to do that.
Um, but to see that, um, I I I saw Rasheed Rice just develop that chemistry with Mahomes. If that continues through the offseason, I
Oh
really
boy.
see him being a top wide receiver too.
Oh
Um,
boy. The rest
so
aren't
yeah.
that
Well, I
notable.
wanted to talk about Zay
Yeah,
Flowers.
the
We'll
next
rush
two a
through
little
the
bit.
the the last couple, but Zay Flowers, um, I think near the end of the year, Lamar started favoring him a lot as a wide receiver one. Could end up next year being a low end wide receiver.
Yeah,
I
we're
really do think.
talking tin foil right now though. Like
Yeah, tinfoil hat.
there's a possibility Zay Flowers is solid next year.
There is definitely a possibility. I really do think how they used him last year was very smart. I do think he has the potential to be a wide receiver one.
Yep. And
Low end, low end wide receiver one. I want to point that out. Low end, but
Josh
a wide
Down,
receiver one.
Josh Downs is kind of similar to Zay.
Yeah,
Um, but again, I wasn't the biggest fan personally of Josh Downs.
yeah.
I
Me
I think
neither.
he's got a good skill set. I don't know how it's going to work with Anthony Richardson though. Um,
Yeah,
it seems like Anthony Richardson kind of wants to take what he's given, which fits really well with Pittman because Pittman is always open.
yeah.
So just kind of take that when he's giving it and when he's not giving it, run. Like he's not going to make a read. He's not going to be
hmm
a timing guy. He's not going to do anything like that. So I
Yeah,
don't know how well Josh Downs is going to fit with him, but we haven't seen a full season of Anthony Richardson in that offense, so it's hard to be like, oh, it's gonna go like this.
yeah,
I just don't know if he's gonna fit with what Anthony Richardson does, in my opinion.
yeah. And that's my concerns also is I want to see what he looks like with Anthony Richardson at the helm. I want to see how he develops with Anthony Richardson because he didn't get much of that time at the beginning of the year
Right.
when Richardson was healthy. So I would like to see how he develops with. Anthony Richardson on the field.
I agree.
That's my one concern.
And then the
So if
last two are
I think our good a good I think this year is going to be
telling.
his deciding factor.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's going to be. So this year will determine whether or not he ends up being a good wide receiver or ends up just being a backup. So
And speak
the
of,
last two,
there's one guy in these last two that is a big decision on whether or not he's going to be
yeah,
relevant. And we'll talk about the other guy first. So JSN, they just re-signed Tyler Lockett. That's the one thing you wanted to not see happen. So you
yep.
probably got to give him another year, I think. I wouldn't be
I mean, he
super.
started looking good at the end of the year. He started looking like he was a playmaker. So that's encouraging.
Hold on to him until you absolutely
Yes.
cannot hold on to him any longer.
Yep.
The
And
light is
I
shining.
agree with that statement. I think he should be in your lineup or not in your lineup, on your bench, but on your team. I
Yeah.
don't think you should give him up unless you absolutely have to use that slot.
But
So
Quentin Johnson, the other guy, we're gonna see.
my biggest
No,
mistake of
Ryan,
2023.
we are gonna see this year.
We will see.
They got rid of everyone. They traded Keenan Allen. They cut Mike Williams. So they have Quentin Johnson and they have um I think Josh Palmer.
Yeah, just Josh Palmer and Quentin Johnson as
So
major like
one of them has
wide
to do
receivers.
something. Now, obviously, they're going to draft a wide receiver at 6,
Yeah,
but and I want that guy on my team. Whoever they draft, I want that guy on my team.
yeah. Uh,
But it does not matter.
so
It could be
frustrating.
Neighbors, it could be
So
Rome, it
frustrating.
could be
It's
Marvin Harrison.
probably gonna be Neighbors.
I don't care who the Chargers tank. That guy is going on to my team. If I'm
It's probably gonna be Neighbors. I don't think Marvin Harrison makes it out of five.
it comes down to
Yeah.
Arizona. Is Arizona going to trade out or are they going to draft a draft Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Yeah, that's that. We will see.
We'll see.
We'll see. When after the draft, we'll reevaluate. But Quentin Johnson last year, just pure disappointment.
Yeah.
Pure
Yeah.
disappointment.
Just looking at his stats.
That's all I have to say. But
And
Jackson
I
Smith and Jigba, there's still hope.
and really quickly, I want to rant on two guys before we end. So going
Yeah.
back to DJ Moore, like I just don't understand what's gonna happen in Chicago. And this isn't really statistically based whatsoever. I'm gonna throw in some for the next guy I rant on. But DJ Moore finally gets to 6. He has chemistry with Justin Fields. And then you trade Justin Fields. Like, what is that going to do to his numbers when Caleb Williams walks in the door? And now he's going to run less. So it could be an elevation factor of, hey, he's going to throw the ball more. So now DJ and Keenan Allen, oddly enough, I'm going to rant about two guys who are on the same team now, um, could elevate them. You know, we could see more from DJ. We could see more from Keenan Allen than we did last year, which would be insane. But I've seen so much ability from DJ Moore to not get the football that it's painful. Like this is the first year where it's like, oh my gosh, it finally paid off to have DJ Moore on my team. And he was
Yeah.
inconsistent the whole year. He had massive
He had ups and
performance,
downs. Yeah.
sucked. Massive performance, sucked. Like the 60 points that he put on me for absolutely no reason. That was great. I love that. Um, but he has that ability. He just needs somebody to deliver. And then Keenan Allen, bro, he had the best season of his entire career, and they told that man to take a pay cut.
Yeah.
That is unbelievable to me. And I understand that Harbaugh probably wants to rebuild the team and he wants it to be his team, and good for you, bro. But Keenan Allen, I think, is going to be the most interesting part of Chicago next year. And if he's able to connect with whatever rookie they bring in. But I don't know. Again, it's going to be hard because when you have vet wide receivers and a rookie QB, that's not usually a pairing that mixes really well. Usually it's your vet
Yeah,
QB and your rookie wide receiver that really takes off and looks good.
yeah,
Usually. And again, it depends on the vet quarterback, but because like you saw
yeah,
with Drake London and when he came out as a rookie, he had that connection with Ritter, and when Ritter got in and played, that's when he started to have really good numbers because they had that rookie connection. You just saw it with CJ Stroud and Tank Dell before he got injured. And then you had that anomaly of Nico then doing well with a rookie QB. But I can't think of another time really that like a rookie QB came into a veteran wide receiver and they just skyrocketed. I mean, you saw rookie on rookie again with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow.
yeah.
So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. I don't want to downplay it, and I don't know. I don't know. We're going to have to wait and find out next season, which is the fun of fantasy football. But that's kind of my last little rant piece on Chicago.
Yeah. Well, Chicago, I don't know. I honestly don't. It is all up in the air for Chicago right now on whether or not they're going to be a good team next year or they're going to struggle.
Yeah,
It all depends on the chemistry of the team and how they click, how the offensive coordinator runs the offense. Because I believe they have a decent defense, but the offense is really where it's going to be at
going to come
um,
down to it.
in deciding the level of play for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah,
So,
but they're the team to
and
beat, I think, in the NFC North now.
I still think it's the Lions and Packers.
Oh no, you're right. I think sorry,
I
after
I
the
think
Lions, I think Chicago is the team to beat.
if if the Vikings get a good quarterback and he ends up hitting like a CJ Stroud, like if he ends up hitting, I think the Vikings could potentially, with the defensive weapons that they brought in. Sorry, this is a rant on the side. Josh, you could choose to add this to the podcast or not, but um, I think with the defensive weapons and the defensive coordinator that we had, I mean, look at the Vikings defense last year. We went from being like what ranked 28 or 29 last year to this year being ranked like near the end of the year, we were a top 10 defense.
Right,
If we would have had Kirk Cousins at the helm and our offense had been clicking with JJ, Kirk Cousins, all of that, we would have made it pretty deep into the playoffs. I
right.
guarantee. But because we didn't have all of that, our offense was in shambles and our our defense was the only thing good on that team.
Yeah, we'll see.
I yeah,
We'll see.
but I really think the Vikings, the NFC North is going to look really tough next year. Very tough with everything that's going on. So that's it. That's my rant.
Well, go ahead
Boom.
and close this out
Right there.
on that
All
note.
right. So thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate everything that you guys do, commenting, whatnot, watching our videos, interacting with everything that we do. So um, thank you. We love you. And please like and subscribe this YouTube channel and follow us on all of our social media sites. X, sorry, I was going to say Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook, um, all at Last Place FP. So follow us. And again, like and subscribe this YouTube channel. It really helps us out. Um, so we appreciate it. Next week, we are going to be doing a tight end episode, and I
Should be
believe
pretty
we're
quick.
doing defense. Is it tight end defense?
No,
I don't
no.
know. I know we're doing tight ends next week. We might wrap in a little bit
It'll
of
be a
defense in
short,
there.
little sweet
It'll
episode.
be a short little thing because we don't have very many tight ends to look at. But um, yes, so please connect with us next week. to talk about tight ends. Love y'all. Ethan,
Never forget.
tell them where it's at.
Never forget. I'm not going to tell them anything other than the most important thing about this podcast,
Yeah.
which is sometimes you're right.
And sometimes you're the
Right.
king. You're the king. The champion.
You're not much of a king. The only thing you're the king of is probably crap. But we'll see
Oh,
you next time.
ouch. Ouch.